You don't listen, do you?
To my defense, I do remember you saying kitty.
I said Powkiddy. Powkiddy.
Huh. Well, I was close.
Greetings and welcome to the channel. This is Mikhailov from Team Retro, where we like retro games and the devices that bring them to us. So we have not one, but two devices to talk about today, and both of them are by Powkiddy. We have the RGB20S as well as the Powkiddy x55. Now, I've been meaning to talk about these two handhelds for a while now, and just with all the influx of handheld reviews and now controller reviews that I've been getting in, I just haven't had a chance to give these two handhelds the attention that they deserve. Both of these handhelds were sent to me by Gogamegeek for the purposes of this review, so we're going to play a little bit of catch up today, and we're going to see if either of these two devices are worth your hard-earned dollar bucks. So let's dive in and get to work. So let's go ahead and start our journey with the RGB20S, and that journey is actually going to start here in Specktown. So what do we have here? We have the CPU is an RK3326, which that's quite a dated chipset at this point. It is an ARM quad-core processor with 1.5 gigahertz. There is 1 gigabyte of DDR3L RAM. You have a dual SD card support capable of up to 256 gigabytes. You do have a front-facing speaker. The screen is a 3.5-inch IPS OCA laminated display capable of a 480p resolution. Powering the device is a 3500 milliamp hour battery, which promises about 8 hours of playtime. The operating system is an open source Linux OS. We are actually running Arc OS on the unit that I was sent. All right, so let's get the device tour started, and no I/O at the top. On the side here, you have the power button as well as the reset button and the TF2 card for you to put your games in. And on this side, you have TF1 for the operating system as well as a volume rocker. On the back of the device, have your shoulder and trigger buttons, which are also used to rest your index fingers. And then you have the 3.5-inch screen on the front here. You have these Switch-style joysticks, which are on the top. And then you have on the bottom a D-pad with your face buttons. And then you have a menu button and select and start in the middle here. On the bottom, you have the charging port as well as the OTG port and a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack. So right off the bat, I'm just going to go ahead and talk about a couple of quick impressions that I actually do have with this device. One, we've got to do our shake test. And that's all coming from this right here. Now, I would honestly say that the device is okay to hold if you are actually focusing on using these joysticks here. But once you get down here, the D-pad and the face buttons, well, they may be fine. There's almost no sound here with that D-pad. It's got a nice mush to it. And then the face buttons, again, they're fine. They're passable. What bothers me about this device is the location of the D-pad and the face buttons. Why they were not put up top here, I will not understand. But this is just not comfortable having a hold a device like this and then have to reach down here. And given the size of this device, there really is just no way I could recommend this for any other reason than maybe to give it as a gift. As far as what you're going to be able to play on this thing, PlayStation 1 is more than likely going to be the max. Nintendo 64, there are very few games for Nintendo 64 that will run on this, which is a shame because that would be the system that I would imagine that this joystick placement would work best on. And so I'm under attack right now by a chicken, and for whatever reason, I can't seem to... Oh, did I finally get the chicken? I don't even know what button I pushed to take that chicken out, but there's a lot of graphical issues with trying to play this game. Alright, so apparently L2 is snowball throwing. But while this game does seem to be maintaining a 60 FPS frame rate, it just doesn't look that great. Let's see if I can hit Kenny. Don't understand why I can't hit Kenny. And there are going to be some N64 games that you are going to be able to play on this device. For example, here I'm playing Space Invaders, and I would argue that this is probably not the greatest of experiences. You can see the frame rate is dipping a little bit, but the game is, for the most part, playable. It's just not very good, especially on a device like this, because the screen is actually very hard to see or read. And so I would kind of reserve this more for, I would say, like a Game Boy game, but then I don't know that I would want to play a Game Boy game on this because these controls are just so oddly placed and just so weird that it's just not a joy or a comfort to play at all. In fact, if you wanted to use a cheaper device that is meant to play lower end games, I would actually recommend something like the Powkiddy V10. This is a newer device by Powkiddy. It doesn't even make as much of a noise when you shake it. And this has a native 3:2 aspect ratio, so it makes it really good for Game Boy Advance, but it also is already much more comfortable for a vertical device because you don't have your D-pad and your face buttons hugging the very bottom of the device. You have them up a little bit more, so even if this device, the RGB20S, added a little bit more down here for you to grab, this would be much more comfortable than it is. And this isn't the most comfortable thing in the world, but it's definitely better. This is probably going to be more bang for your buck than something like this. I will leave affiliate links for Gogamegeek in the description below for both of these devices. If you're interested in the RGB20S, I will leave a link, but I actually would suggest that you get the Powkiddy V10 over this device. Now for this video, I am doing something a little bit different. Instead of using my phone for my overhead footage, I'm actually using this Emeet streaming webcam. And this was sent to me for review, and what we have here is a webcam that does output in 4K HDR. It does have autofocus and microphones built in. There is a nice little privacy sensor on the top, so when you're not using it, you could just slide it closed and it will close the camera. And as you could see here, the footage for this video is all being done on this streaming webcam. It's instantly recognized by OBS, and you can record, you can use it for streaming, you can use it for face shots, and the picture quality is fairly decent. So I'll leave a link in the video description if you are interested in picking this up. All right, now let's talk about the Powkiddy x55. Now this is a 16:9 aspect ratio screen, and it is a much bulkier and more ergonomic device than the Powkiddy RGB20S. So let's go ahead and set this over here, and let's ride on into Specktown. This device has an RK3566 quad-core ARM Cortex CPU with a clock speed of 1.8 gigahertz. There is a GPU on this device, which is an ARM Mali G52. The device is powered by 2 gigabytes of LPDDR4X RAM, and you can have up to 128 gigabytes for the operating system through micro SD card, and then you can also have a second SD card that supports up to 256 gigabytes. There is a 4,000 milliamp hour battery, which advertises about 4 hours of playtime. And you also have an HDMI display out if you wanted to connect this to a television. The screen is a 5.5-inch IPS RGB screen, which has a 16:9 aspect ratio. The device ships with an open source Linux operating system and does support custom firmware. All right, let's device tour this now. So at the top, you have your reset button, 3.5 millimeter jack, your charging port, your mini HDMI out, your OTG port, your power button, and you have stacked shoulders and triggers. Now, these are digital. These are very clicky. In fact, let's go ahead and do the click test. Yeah, these are some darn clicky bumpers and triggers. They are loud. Front of the device, very nice screen. Not the best screen I've ever seen. Definitely not the worst. And you have your Switch-style joysticks. They do the job, but as you know, they are not the best out there. Let's do our sound test on the D-pad. Again, nice, mushy Powkiddy D-pad. Face buttons next. Not too bad, not terrible, not great. Very interesting choice that they would put the volume up and down buttons here, and volume up is on the left, whereas volume down is on the right, which is a little bit jarring. I actually found myself accidentally blasting the volume as opposed to lowering it. And then you have select and start here. I'm not sure that I would have put these so close to each other, but this is what they decided to do, so I guess we're going to kind of go with it. SD cards on the bottom, as well as 2 downward-facing speakers. And then on the back, you just have these nice ergonomic bumps that actually make this device pretty feasible. And so one of the things I actually like about the Powkiddy X55 is that this device in particular has a joystick-centered configuration as opposed to a D-pad centered configuration. And so this is actually the device I played most of Half-Life on due to its Portmaster support, thanks to the ability for this device to run Rocknix. And even though I didn't care for this game, I don't think it was because I played it on this device. I think it's just because it's a not great game. I'm sorry, Half-Life fans, it just isn't. And I was actually surprised by how well Half-Life did play on this particular handheld. And so Portmaster support is a very good reason to want to pick up something like the X55 if you are looking for a Portmaster machine on a budget. And the 16:9 screen will mean that most ports that support a 16:9 resolution will look very well on this device. And so here's Balatro running on the Powkiddy X55, and you could see it's running quite well. This is actually pretty nice of a screen to be able to play this game on. And ports aren't going to be the only good thing that's going to play on this device. PSP is also fairly decent here. While you may not get the entire library, some of these lightweight games like Mega Man Powered Up will actually play just fine on this, and it's got a nice screen and the controls are in the right place. Even with this not being D-pad centric, the D-pad is not hard to access at all. And so if you want to dabble in the PSP library on a budget, this might be a fairly decent device. I would definitely say that out of the two devices that Gogamegeek has sent me, this one is the more impressive of the two. And so I don't want you to take just my word for it. So what I did was I actually gave these two devices to Nefarious for a night, and I wanted to see what his thoughts were on them, not from necessarily a handheld enthusiast perspective, but from a regular layperson's perspective. And so he's going to give his impressions in a new segment that we're calling
One Night with Nefarious!
That's me. Good evening. I'm Nefarious, and I know why you're here. Mikhailov's daunting wisdom and technical prowess, well, that can get kind of scary, I should know. No, what you need is the perspective of a guy whose knowledge of technology is right up there with most people's knowledge of the human nervous system. If that sounds about right, I'm your guy. Don't mind the bags under my eyes. I had a long night spending it with not one, but two devices. Indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the tale of two kitties. And it really is the best of retro. And also the worst. Let's start with the Powkiddy x55. Right off the bat, you are introduced to a sleek, smooth model. Just looking at it is really great. It's shiny. And don't lie to me and tell me that doesn't count for some points. And holding it is just a fantastic experience. Smooth, comfortable, I could carry this anywhere. And that's a good thing, because you're going to be holding this thing for a while. Because the battery life is actually pretty impressive. Which really comes in handy, because sometimes you need a little extra time to get through that level of contra. It also sports some smooth, round edges, which means myself and no one else suffered any slices or cuts this time. The buttons are comfortable and responsive, and most of all, a little on the quiet side. It's important to have comfortable buttons on any device, especially if you had any interest whatsoever of playing a fighting game or any game that requires any sort of technical know-how or prowess, which means with this device, if you end up losing, it's a skill issue. So get good, noob. Another thing that really sold me on this device was the screen. It's enormous. You really can't go wrong with a crystal clear large screen. Ask Mikhailov. It was the thing that got me into retro devices in the first place. That and the crippling anxiety of losing my childhood. The screen is a double-edged sword. On one hand, you will not be experiencing blurry menus, and your character movements are smooth. On the other hand, that little pixelated bullet that hits you, well, again, this is your fault. So all your skill issues and insecurities will come to light on a crystal clear screen. But let's say messing up is something that you do often, and you really need to blame it on something. Well, boy, do I have the device for you. Next up is the Powkiddy RGB20S. This thing, right off the bat, you have to look how small this is. And no, don't think that I don't appreciate compact devices. I travel plenty of places. I go to work. I avoid responsibility. I hide from my wife when she asks me to do the dishes. So I need something that's pocket-sized. But this comes with some problems. Number one, it is just pointy. Holding this thing is a challenge. Granted, you're going to be able to hold it in one hand, but the edges are uncomfortable, which only adds to difficulty of games that are already difficult. But the true sin that really this handheld committed, you can always judge a good handheld by the games it plays. And on this handheld, I lost on the first round of Contra. The first round! In order for me to lose the first round on Contra, one of three things have to happen. 1, a massive earthquake. 2, sudden blindness. And 3, a terrible device. There's no way. It's like my one parlor trick. This device is so uncomfortable to hold that the travel with the buttons and being able to do anything is a challenge. I went ahead and decided to take it to a true test, though. I played GoldenEye on this device. I mean, come on. It's got analog on it. Give it a go. The first little Russian soldier in that level was like a final boss fight. The directions were off, it was stuttering, and the final sin of this handheld is the noise. Do you hear that? Well, of course you did. So did my neighbor, probably. You can't do anything sneaky with this device. Unfortunately, the clicking is so distracting, in addition to giving you hand cramps while you lose every game you play. You can blame all difficulty of any game on this. The first level of Contra, man! I wouldn't recommend this to anybody, unless it's a prank, at any rate. It was a wonderful evening regardless. And if you're out there looking for a Powkiddy, go with an X55. I think you won't be disappointed. Now, if you have a friend in particular that just needs to be taught a lesson, have him beat Contra on this. It's been a wonderful evening, guys. I hope you learned something.
And so with that, we're going to wrap things up with my final thoughts, and I really don't have much to say about either device here. I would definitely recommend the Powkiddy X55 over the RGB20S, just strictly for ergonomics, power, as well as just the fact that this device kind of, I don't know, really isn't it. And in 2024, there are much better devices out there that Powkiddy makes that will cost just about as much, but will give you an overall better experience. So if I were to find the winner of this Powkiddy quick review, I would definitely give it to the Powkiddy X55. And again, I'll have links in the description if you are interested in picking any of these up. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Are any of these devices by Powkiddy worth your $1? And what do you think is the best use case for handhelds like this? And please feel free to continue the conversation in the Retro Handhelds and the Steam Machine Discords, where you can find me hanging out in between videos. And if you want to be like these wonderful people here on the screen, you can do so by going to my Patreon page. Links for all these places will be in the video description. But that'll do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and if this was helpful to you in any way, please be sure to like and subscribe. Until next time, bye for now, and don't stop believing.